Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles, your weekly film fix. Today, we're back at our Charlie Rose table, which some of you have complimented us on, and some of you have not. Well, I don't give a damn if you don't like it.
One person.
Yeah, well, we like it. And today, we have a special guest. He actually just went on vacation, and he had a little suntan, so you might not recognize him. Mr. Michael Foltz is sitting right over here.
Hey, how are you? See the shirt?
That sounds vaguely racist.
Uh-oh. Well, that did not turn out that way.
Well, as Michael Foltz, I am a racist, so.
Yes, yes. And
Jeff is back.
Make a big comment about how much you like Bush or something, and then you know.
Oh, yes, I love the pussy.
Yes, Mike.
This is going nowhere really fast.
I'm lost here. I want to thank everyone for their viewer responses. They are going to be posted in the near future. We actually took some time recently, and we actually responded to many of them. And again, if you like to submit a question, not so much as a comment, not show topic suggestions, just ask us a question. We'll respond to it. Do your part as a fan and promote the CineFiles on your Facebook walls, your Twitter feeds, etc. Every little bit helps. And subscribe to the show, and of course visit us on the Facebook page. We're always there interacting with the fans. We love your comments. And anyway, let's get on to this. Mr. Coen, this was your topic, the neo-noir.
Oh, neo-noir. Neo-noir was a topic I suggested. The interesting thing about neo-noir, it's a term applied to film noirs, or films that are self-consciously noirs that were made post-1950s. The films that the French, whom coined the term film noir, for these fatalistic crime thrillers of the late 30s, 40s through the 50s, when people made those films like The Maltese Falcon or the original, like Kiss Me Deadly, they were not aware they were making film noirs. What differentiates a neo-noir from film noirs is that the people making neo-noirs were firmly aware and intentionally wanted to put out the idea that they're doing modern takes on neo-noirs in a modern context. So I chose 4 films that I felt kind of fit in this category, going from the 70s to modern day. I originally had a film from the early 60s called Harbor, but we had to strike that and replace it with something else because of technical difficulties, but there you go. But let's start off with the first film, early 70s, about 1972, Robert Altman's great The Long Goodbye, his take on a Philip Marlowe story. Philip Marlowe, a character that's been filmed many times, many different adaptations.
I guess it would be one of the most famous private detectives in the film industry, and in print, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, he's a very famous. I mean, he's up there. You got like Mike Hammer. You've also got Sam Spade, who, funny enough, is only featured in like maybe one story and a novel called The Maltese Falcon. But Philip Marlowe has been used a lot, and the character of Philip Marlowe was created by oh my God, I'm spacing out. Raymond Chandler,
okay, very good.
Who was a Brit with OCD. He always wore gloves, but he created this incredibly. The deal with Philip Marlowe was he was a private detective, a somewhat seedy one, but he was sort of like a white knight in a world that was filled with grays and black and white, and he always did the right thing, which is what makes The Long Goodbye so interesting, because Robert Altman basically subverts the whole concept of Philip Marlowe. But the film itself is a really interesting film. It starts off with one story where Philip Marlowe has promised to help a friend. And then there's another story where he is asked to find the husband of this woman who may or may not be in this insane asylum and try to get him out because he seems to have disappeared somehow. Eventually the two stories converge. But what the movie's really about is 1972 Southern California and this anachronistic figure known as Philip Marlowe. What happens when you juxtapose this old-fashioned cigarette-smoking guy who still wears a rumple suit, still says dame every now and then, against this whole Southern California healthy New Age lifestyle? And so it's rife for a lot of social satire, Plus, it's ripe for some criticism of the conventions of film noir.
Elliot Gould, I would not say is your typical
No, he's
Marlowe
not.
character.
Robert Altman apparently fought the studios to get him in there and play that role. Originally, the studios wanted either Lee Marvin or Robert Mitchum, who did manage to play Philip Marlowe twice in 2 other films.
I can see that.
But and he was very good as a Philip Marlowe. But he wanted a quirky choice. He wanted Elliot Gould, and Elliot Gould at that point I think was in disfavor with the studios. He got in some trouble in some film, and he wasn't working for 2 years before Robert Altman brought him into play.
Yeah, the one thing that I thought when I saw the opening of the film, which is very, very Altman-esque, if that's a term you can use.
Of course you can.
Yeah, thank you. With Elliot, Marlowe going into going to buy cat food, and the way that's portrayed, actually, you're talking about Chandler was a little OCD. You see this in this character, and it's just this whole long shots of him looking for cat food, and this should be the most boring, stupid thing. It's like, I wonder what cat food is this and this, but yet I was very amused by this, and I gotta say, I believe this will be speculation. I have a feeling that the Coen brothers saw this scene when they made The Big Lebowski, because there's a scene in The Big Lebowski where he goes to get this milk, and it is so much like that scene, and even the same quirkiness.
Well, that cat thing is a running theme throughout the film, but even there's a great line at the end where he refers to his cat before something happens. It's kind of a very jarring moment at the end of the film. I'm not going to spoil it, but Marlowe does something. Altman intentionally has Marlowe do something that Marlowe normally wouldn't do. And it's a very interesting ending or coda to this movie.
Well, what I like about this film is that, first of all, I don't think Robert Altman's a bad director, but I'm hit or miss with him. Some films of his I love, some films of his I could pass. But this, I would have to say, surprisingly, is my favorite of all of Robert Altman films. Because
Are you really of all his films?
Yes, out of all his films.
Then
yes.
now, what would be your second favorite? I just want to get an idea of your.
Okay, my second favorite.
We'll just say your top few. What would you say? So I can get an idea of your taste.
I obviously like The Player.
Mm-hmm.
I like Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Three Women. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to go through it. McCabe and Mrs. Miller. That's.
Oh, I love
that's
McCabe and
half.
Mrs. Miller.
What about MASH?
MASH, I love, which is something that was interesting because I read part of the oral biography of Robert Altman, and he said that Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland tried to get him fired off the film, and I find it interesting that he cast Elliot Gould in this film as his quirky choice, as Eric said. And, I mean, I really enjoyed the film. One of the things that took me really by surprise in this film, the sudden acts of violence shocked me in this film, where you have... I don't want to spoil anything, but they're primarily, to me, against women. And I don't think it has anything to do with the director or the writing, but I just remember sitting there watching this, happy-go-lucky type of movie, and then all of a sudden there's certain scenes where it's like, whoa, where'd that come from? And I actually enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not sadistic or anything, but I just found it really, interesting.
Yes, you are.
No, I just found it interesting. I like pussy. I don't like violence. But
way to go, Mr. Volts.
But I just really enjoyed the film, and it's obvious the Coen brothers who have admitted that they're Chandler fans, because even though the Coens hadn't come around, you can see the similarities in their films and this film.
Well, the thing that's also interesting about The Long Goodbye, the screenplay was written by Lee Brackett, who also was one of the writers of The Big Sleep, the classic Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall take on Philip Marlowe, the one that's like probably the most famous Philip Marlowe movie.
And weren't they also one of the writers for Empire Strikes Back as well?
Yes, Lee Brackett. Well, she wrote the original draft,
and then she died.
So Lee Brackett is a woman, though.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't quite
She wrote the first draft, and she died, and I didn't believe Lawrence Kasdan came in and did a polish with Wallen Green.
Which then makes me...
But by the way, the movie The Long Goodbye is
Goodbye.
nothing like the novel. They completely changed the plot, the mystery, everything. There are characters in it that aren't in the novel. But again, it was Altman took this idea and worked with Lee Brackett to develop and say, let's throw this anachronistic character into this modern day, early 70s, new agey, health conscious Southern California kind of scenario what will that be like? And that's basically what this film is.
And actually, he did revisit this type of idea in a movie called Health many years later with the New Age.
Well, Health was more like another variation of Nashville. Yes, but that's really about politics.
Yeah.
That's really his take on American politics under the guise of health, this big health conference.
You can see a lot of this improv style where he trusts his actors' instincts just to go crazy.
Right.
Like that scene with the cat food, I think is a perfect example. I believe some of that was on paper, but Elliot Gould just said, "Go with it."
But see, that's one of the reasons why I'm hit or miss with Robert Altman, because sometimes that style works, sometimes it doesn't. At least for me, it's just like the films of Christopher Guest. Sometimes, they're brilliant, but sometimes you sit there and it's just like, okay, I get it, they're improvising, but this isn't actually that funny anymore.
Well, going back to the cast, he has a very interesting cast. Well, for some reason, he cast this pitcher for the New York Yankees, Jim Bouton, to play Elliot Gould's best friend. But then he has someone like Sterling Hayden, who was a guy that he has to break out of the insane asylum. Sterling Hayden, a great, phenomenal actor who's been in so many things. He was in some great noirs himself, The Killing and The Asphalt Jungle. So it's kind of a classy move on Altman's part to cast him in a major part like that.
And also look for a cameo by Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of the early role as a deaf hitman. Kind of an interesting character trait,
Right.
All right. I think it's a very unusual film from Altman.
One of his best, according to Jeff.
I don't think it's an unusual film from Altman at all. It's pretty much fits in with his usual
think it's unusual
thing. It's an
because
unusual take on
I just think it's
genre.
unusual for him to actually even take on something like this Philip Marlowe character and then do something in his style.
I don't think it's unusual at all. He did
don't think so.
Popeye. You could say that was unusual for him. He did Gosford Park, which was his
Robert
take
Altman
on the
is kind of
drawing
a
room
maverick.
mystery.
I'll give him that.
But anyway, so moving on. That's Long Goodbye. The next film would be a 1974 film called Night Moves, starring Gene Hackman and directed by Arthur Penn.
Oh yes.
And Night Moves is a really interesting film. It tends to polarize people. It can be either hit or miss for people. I actually am a fan of the film. It's similar in ways, in terms of its approach, as A Long Goodbye, but without the satire. It takes the idea of a classic film noir private detective mystery, but updates it to modern times.
And a lot more serious.
And it deals with the character Gene Hackman plays a married private detective who suspects that his wife is having an affair. That's one plot line. And the other plot line is he is hired by a wealthy woman to find her missing daughter who's run away and she has no idea where she's at. The movie also has an interesting cast, a very young Melanie Griffith.
And James Woods.
Heavenly
A
Body.
very young James Woods. I think it was his first movie. He
One
did
of
this
his
before
first
The Onion
long
Field,
hair.
right?
Yeah. I've been a fan of this film since I've seen it. I saw it years ago on AMC, and because it wasn't really readily available at the time.
Yeah, because it only became on DVD recently, and that's when I first
Yeah,
saw it.
I saw it, and I'll go on record and say I think this is Arthur Penn's best film. I really, really liked it because it's a different Gene Hackman.
You liked it better than Bonnie and Clyde?
Yes. The reason I like it is that you know how there's a lot of films that try to go back, and like we're talking about doing these neo-noirs, that try to really capture this old feeling, and it just feels like, you know what, it's not working because it's trying too hard to feel like an old movie. This one presents it in a modern day. It presents it normally, but yet it's somehow able to really feel like it could take place at any era, which
Yeah, I
is
agree.
quite an accomplishment.
I agree. It's also, I would say that, I'm sorry to cut you off,
go
I just
ahead.
want to get this in there. It's a great character study. Gene
that's
Hackman
the
is
sequel.
phenomenal in it.
The mystery plays second to the character
It's
study.
really about him, and it's
Yeah.
about how he's just, his whole life has always been, he was this ex-college football star it's sort of implicated that he never really, reached his apex in life. He's just kind of settled into being a private detective, and the only thing he knows how to do is solve things. He thinks he's always one step ahead of everybody. He talks about his father, who they've never reconciled. He had a bad relationship with, and he talks about how he actually searched and found his father, but never actually went up and talked to him. And that's his whole life, searching and finding out his wife's having an affair, but having this problem with actually dealing with the situation on a mature level. And it's that kind of approach that gets him in trouble and reaches this very fatalistic, nihilistic ending at the end of the film, where he's in over his head.
Well, that's what I enjoyed about the film most of all, is that it was fatalistic and nihilistic. Because, I mean, I guess in noir films there usually is an unhappy ending, but this film, it didn't depress me, but I could see how it was depressing, and I think that might have been what might have, like you said, it polarizes people. That might be the point where it's like, where they're like, I was going with this film until then because they thought through all this maybe there would be a happy ending, and there wasn't. And I mean, one of the things that really saddened me was, I don't remember the character or the actor's name, but the one he befriends and then ends up perishing on the boat. I thought, first of all, that was a memorable scene, but it was kind of sad to see that character go. Not that I have anything against Gene Hackman, but that really got me, and I was surprised at how much that got. Plus, that whole scene is just phenomenally filmed. And it's done in such an ordinary way. It doesn't distract you with like angles or shots or, a big action sequence. So it feels more realistic than, let's say, something you'd see in a modern day action film, even though this isn't.
Well, try to imagine if that was made today. It'd be Michael Bay with the whole Air Force out there.
Pretty much.
Or not, or if it was someone else, like, I could see that being made today and it could be a good film, because there are directors out there that are still making films like that. We're going to discuss a film. One of the films we're going to discuss today falls into that camp of a modern day filmmaker today that could pull off a Night Moves. But the thing, but you talk about the ending without spoiling too much. That ending works on so many levels. It's tragic. It's a good coda to the mystery. It's a good reveal. And it's completely fatalistic because Gene Hackman is stuck. I mean, basically, it literally stuck. Without spoiling anything, he has no way out of this situation.
It's also one of the few films where you'll see Gene Hackman and James Woods fight two notorious movie villains.
What I like about the film, and what really makes it work for me, is that how sometimes where you have a movie where it decides it wants to be a character study, but yet it wants to be a mystery, but yet it can't make up its mind. It's very hard to balance these two things.
They do a good job of balancing.
They do a brilliant job, because I was equally invested in the character study as well as the mystery. And I really, really like Gene Hackman's performance in this one. This is a very different performance for him. It's a lot more low-key than he usually is. We're screaming and all this. And what also there's just so many things in that movie that I like. It just saddens me when you see a movie like this, because it's just so good, it got completely forgotten, and there's not many films being made like this today.
It's truly a sleeper.
It really is a sleeper, and I love the way the mystery unfolds, because you think it's going one way, and then all of a sudden it becomes this completely different thing than what you think, and it's really well played out. And what's interesting, too, is that even though this movie did not do well in the box office, it got some good accolades, I assume, but it disappeared. It was gone. However, you have seen a lot of these basic concepts. I don't want to say basic. The concepts from this film, I would say a perfect example is The Last Boy Scout, where the opening scene where Bruce Willis finds out his wife is cheating on him. Of course, he does something about it, unlike Gene Hackman. And also you can take another example, is that Bruce Willis was a somewhat successful Secret Service agent, as was Gene Hackman with the pro football career. They both fell back into it. They didn't want to be a private
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, Night Moves is a very mature, grown-up movie.
Yeah.
Because
it's smart.
You brought up Last Boy Scout. That's an immature, overly simplistic take.
Sure.
Because in this film, the way that Gene Hackman deals with, say, his wife having an affair, and how she deals with it, is very grown-up and mature. It's a very interesting dynamic. This is a film about adults for adults. Mike Foltz was here. He'd be saying, "And Melanie Griffin is nude in it," which unfortunately she's 16 years old, so it's a little awkward to watch. But
I noted she had a nice body in the beginning.
Thank you, Mike.
But there you go.
Well,
I said Griffith. Sorry.
It's a great movie. Definitely, I would consider Arthur Penn's best film, and of course, as Eric mentioned, he's probably best known for Bonnie and Clyde. Little Big Man.
I love Little Big Man.
Little Big Man's a good movie, but
Night Moves is a sleeper.
Is a phenomenal mystery, also character study.
Now, I should add before we go on to the next two films, we kind of had rules when we set up this episode. When I say neo-noir, it has to be the concept of a film noir, the classic idea of a film noir in a modern context. So I know some fans out there are going to ask us, well, why don't you talk about L.A. Confidential? Why don't you talk about Hammett? Why don't you talk about, Chinatown? Those films are set in those periods. We want to go with modern. and taking those conceits in a contemporary environment. Okay, so we're moving on to the 80s, and we're going to talk about the Coen brothers' Blood Simple. Now, there are different kinds of film noir conceits, or classic conceits. You have the private detective solving a mystery, or you have a crime plotted usually by a man and his mistress, or a man and a married woman against her husband, whatever, sort of a love triangle situation, and it all goes wrong somehow. And so the next two films we're going to talk about fall squarely within that subgenre of noir. First one is Coen Brothers' Blood Simple, which deals with that whole thing. I mean, I don't know if I have to explain the plot. I think most of us out there have seen it.
Have seen it by now.
But basically it follows the pattern of man, woman having an affair. Woman wants to get rid of her sadistic husband, and they engage in this plot to get rid of him. So.
Of all the early Coen brothers films, this would probably be their most tightly constructed script in terms of where, the other films you would see would be more artsy and whatever. This is a pretty much straight-ahead thriller.
Yeah, stays. There's no quirkiness.
And this is their first
really
directed film.
First directed film. They were actually working as film editors. In fact, they actually were editors on Evil Dead and actually became friends with Sam Raimi, which would become a partnership years later.
And they filmed the trailer for this film to get funding for it. Am I correct?
I believe so. I'm not too sure. But they did. Let's just say it was a very low-budget film. It was less than $1 million. It was stars Frances McDormand, who would
their first collaboration.
Their first collaboration, and then of course they would get one of them would get married.
Great Emmett Walsh,
and who I actually will go on record.
One of my favorite character actors.
I think he's a phenomenal character actor who unfortunately got pigeonholed into movies like Missing in Action and Red Scorpion, and he's a terrific.
He's done good stuff.
He's done great
stuff. He hasn't done just that. He's had a good career.
I know what's so funny is that people think he's this redneck by the way he talks, but he's actually from New York. But he's such a good actor. But he plays a very sleazy PI, and let me tell you, if there wasn't a role written for this man, this is the absolute most perfect role for him. He is absolutely wonderful.
And what's his name? As the husband.
Dan Hedaya. How are you going to say, what's his name? Nick Tortelli.
Nick Tortelli.
Come on, Dan Hedaya.
Dan Hedaya. And that's a great scene when he's trying to kill him. He just won't die.
I think that too is a commentary on what Alfred Hitchcock was talking about. Hitchcock made a film, I believe it was Torn Curtain, where there's a scene with a man trying to be killed in an oven, and Hitchcock actually said that he wanted to show it's not as easy to kill to someone as you might appear on film.
Right, and the Coen brothers took that to heart, and they made
took
that the whole set
heart.
piece.
Yeah, and it is pretty outrageous.
And it's a good film, but it's a throwback to like Double Indemnity, or The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Well, I think you having said that, I think I'm going to have to watch it again. Because while I can certainly respect the film and I like the style of the film, I can't say I was wowed by the film. But I think that's also because I only saw it recently. So by the time, now this was made in 1980, I believe?
84.
84.
So this is your backwards thing again?
Well, sort of. It's not.
You see all the later films first?
Yeah, it's basically, yes, that other people have ripped off this film style. So, of course, I've seen them first, and now I'm going back to seeing this, and I'm like, oh, well, this other film did this, but I know that they did it first.
Well, why? I mean, what would you say your issues were?
To me, I know I'm going to get attacked for this, but when I watched it, I felt it was more or less style over substance half the time. Like, I was distracted more by the shots, but I really didn't pay attention to the story. So, and that is fully on me. I'm not saying they did this intentionally, but I'm just saying for me, it was more always style.
You mean you couldn't handle the dream logic?
No, it has nothing to do with dream logic. Oh, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be attacked.
I think as a first film, it's very impressive. The camera work is amazing. There's this wonderful shot, I believe, over the bar, which it's very impressive for people who have never really directed real films before to come up with some of these angles and topics. Of all the films, though, if you haven't really seen many Coen Brother films, who are you? This is the one I probably recommend that you start out with because it's probably the most normal film they've made.
Well, it is actually kind of unique. If you look at their canon, since it's their first film, it's unique. But there's a certain there's a Coen Brothers style. whatever it is they're doing. In fact, they've visited the whole noir thing. You know, Big Lebowski, Miller's Crossing, which is one of my favorite movies of all fucking time. But there is a Coen Brothers style, whatever thing they handle. Somehow, Blood Simple does feel outside of that world. Well, it doesn't seem to exist in the same universe
because it's not as quirky as
it's not as quirky as the other films. But that's not saying don't see it. So moving on, we're going to come to our last film. It's the most recent film to have been released. It's an Australian film called The Square, directed by Nash Edgerton and written by his brother Joel Edgerton, who's poised to be the next Hollywood hot thing. He was in Animal Kingdom, another great Australian crime film that came out last year. And he's one of the leads in the new Thing prequel. God knows when that's coming out. They keep changing the release date.
October 17th.
So we saw the preview last year at Comic-Con.
Right, we did. We saw that together. And which didn't look that bad.
Exactly. That's why I don't understand.
It didn't like overly excite me or anything, but you know, it wasn't the wreck I thought it was going to be. But anyways, Joel Edgerton's also in it. He has a supporting part. But it's basically it's in the same tradition as, you know, Double Indemnity and, you know, Postman Always Rings Twice, just like Blood Simple was. A man is having an affair. It's a married man having an affair with a married woman, and he and her husband is a thief, and they plot together to steal the money that he recently robbed and run away together to live happily ever after.
Which sounds very cliched the way you say that, like it's been done every detective. But let me tell you, it's anything but when you actually see the execution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Eric, before you recommended this to me, I haven't even heard of it, which I'm embarrassed to say. Why the fuck aren't people talking about this movie? This movie was phenomenal.
Well, it did. It had a lot of festival buzz. It came out, it was actually made in 2008, I think, but wasn't released on our shores to 2010 in limited places.
Phenomenal.
I saw a video on demand.
And it became on video on demand.
I really, really, really like this film. In fact, if Night Moves wasn't on this show, I would say this is the best film of the bunch. It was really a surprise. I love that they got you know, it's like when you see the characters, they're not these really bad people. They really do care about each other. They're both in the guy is in a loveless marriage. The other woman is in a marriage that's where it's just a real trashy guy who doesn't takes her for granted. And you actually do hope that these people get together. You know, you're actually saying, I hope they can get together. But then, what they try to do, their plan, you go, whoa, this is just a little crazy here. Right. And this little plan that should seem very easy and, you know, an easy way to get out of everything, starts off a chain of events that just continues.
And a chain of events are really interesting because it becomes an ensemble piece, which is really interesting for a film of this kind. You think it's just going to be focused on this like love triangle thing, but then it branches out and becomes this like ensemble piece because, I mean, I'm not spoiling anything to say this, but Joel Edgerton plays an arsonist that they hire to burn down this woman's house so that they can get to the money and run away. Make it seem like it was stolen because of that or burned up with the house. But Joel Edgerton's character has a girlfriend, and she's instrumental in why all this starts to fuck up and fall apart around them. And then there's all these other peripheral characters, like the construction guys that this guy works with, and all of a sudden they start coming into play as well. And it just escalates.
It's a brilliantly constructed screenplay.
Exactly.
Because all of them.
It's the details.
It's the details because the one thing that I loved is, like, you know how you have the girlfriend who you were talking about, the girlfriend. Well, in most films today, she would just be some stupid bimbo. It's like, oh, okay, I forgot. But the reason that she fucks up is because she's terrified of this man.
And the ending is absolutely...
And it shouldn't work, but it works brilliantly because they set it up so subtly in the beginning of the movie that you just think, oh, it's a little character trait of this guy to show you what kind of person he is. And then it comes out at the end, it's like, oh, shit, I didn't see that coming. It's a nice twist, and the ending perfectly ends.
Well, I think one of the reasons why also this film didn't make a splash as big was because Animal Kingdom came out shortly after this, and it got overshadowed. But, I mean, I think this, even though it doesn't have as big of a budget or isn't as known, I think this could stand up to Animal Kingdom in terms of, you know, how good the film is.
Well, if this film was made this year, it would be definitely on my top 10, a top 3 even.
Well,
best
there's
film
interesting.
year.
It also it has a believable small town atmosphere.
It's
therefore
gritty.
it explains all. Like in another film, you'd be like, oh, that's just too coincidental. How come they keep running into each other? What's a small town? Everyone knows each other.
And I love the way they use the dog.
The only caveat I have, the only thing I have with the film is very minor, is that it took me a while to figure out that they lived across the river from each other. I thought they were right across the street. That's the way it was initially filmed because they had all that business, their dog.
I do agree with you on that, but I do like the way that they used the dog as the excuse to keep interacting with each other,
Right.
which was believable.
But-
Because the guy kept coming over to the house, and well, why does this guy keep coming over to the house? Well, he keeps having their dog with him. Like your dog kept escaping. That was actually a very clever way to get away with it.
Well, I'm like Edwin here. I am surprised at how much I liked it because for the first 20 minutes, I just felt this film was going nowhere. And then once the plot more or less gets to start moving, that is when I actually start getting more into the film and started really liking it for all the qualities that it has.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Is another strong point of this movie is that I love the character's paranoia. More and more. He's getting letters. He's freaking out. Who knows who? Who does this? And there's all these people that he's afraid that know about this plot, and that I think is the key. The actor whose name escapes me really is phenomenal and holds it together.
Just to go off on a tangent here, Joel Edgerton, why haven't you approved my Facebook profile? I sent you a friend request. Why can't you approve me?
Here. And so there we go. That's that. Do you have anything else to say about The Square?
Is it on Blu-ray by any chance?
I do not know, but I do know it is on HD streaming.
Okay.
I was going to say that.
It is I am going to be buying it though if it is on Blu-ray. That's how much I liked it.
So that wraps up our episode of Neo-Noir. I'm not going to do the whole thing where I say, well, what was your favorite film? Because I feel like each film we discussed is pretty different and unique in its own way, and it'd be too hard for me to say which one
I
is
would
better
say
than the
see
other.
all of them because they're all good.
But they're all my personal favorite examples of this subgenre. There's another film we were going to discuss, but we couldn't. Some of us couldn't get to it. There's a Paul Newman film called Harper that came out in 1961,
Very good
and
film.
in my mind, that's the first of the neo-noir movement, where it was very conscious it was a noir, but at the same time was set in a modern, contemporary context
And
in
it
the
was
early
also
1960s.
It was followed by a lesser sequel called The Drowning Pool.
Yeah, John Poole isn't as good. There's some interesting things about it. It's a flawed movie, but Harper is a really cool film, a very funny film, and it has one of the greatest ambiguous endings ever.
Anyway, I'm Edwin Samuelson. This is the CineFiles. We hope you, again, please share the show on your Facebook and Twitter feeds, and submit your viewer, responses. Ask us questions. We'll respond to them. And
congratulations to Michael Foltz on Strider Nikolai Foltz, his newborn son.
Here, here.
compadre. Wait, what do they say in Russian when they do it?
I don't know. Skull?
No,
Prost?
Novoshka. No, I don't know what it's called.
Oh, let's move on.
Fuck it.
Dimitri? I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, God, I can't believe I just watched the Black Marble too, which they had that whole thing
Is
about
it
it.
those?